This is the ABQ Business Podcast
with your host, Jason Rigby.
Each week we'll interview visionary business leaders to inspire the creative power and spirit
That's in every entrepreneur.
discussing strengths, weaknesses, strategies, systems,
And the problems we can all solve together.
for a new future for local small business.
Hi, and welcome to the Albuquerque Business Podcast. I have Travis, and I want to make sure your last name is good because I always do this. I'm going to try this again. We were making a joke earlier on it, but it's Kellerman.
That's right.
Yeah, so
I'm the
that's
one with the
perfect.
problem. I'm the one that stumbles with it.
No, that's a great name. That's easy to pronounce. I think it is. And you're not the mayor. Some people think that. And you don't own a butcher shop in Albuquerque. No.
I like their meat.
Yeah, exactly. But you are a consultant, and I love this word. You're a futurist.
And again, that made me
You don't
smile.
like, yeah. People
It's
have
hard
given.
to say.
You didn't give yourself that label. Other people gave that to you.
Yes,
So it's
I'm
not.
gonna
It's
say
not like
that.
like you're thinking like an egocentric. I'm a futurist, and decide to put that on the title. Other people kind of gave you that, and then that's where you're at. But
Well,
I
only
think
because the burden there is that you're supposed to predict things and be right about them, and that's extremely difficult to do.
yes,
You can have visions. You can think about strategy that might get there. You can think about a potential future.
right. But I think it's really cool because that's where we're going, and I think finally here, especially in New
definition.
Mexico. And we were just talking about it, and let's just hop right into that. We were making a joke because I have a sticker on my laptop, Space Force. So we were making a joke about it, but then you were saying here in New Mexico that we're at that leading edge for technology to go to space.
There's only so many places where you can send people into space.
Right.
You can test aircraft with enough open space that if it fails, there's not too much of a consequence or too high a risk. There's also not a lot of places where you have these telescope and radar assemblies that there's little light pollution at night. There's
Right.
enough dark, crisp night sky to actually study things. And that's one of the things probably that drew you here is that even in Albuquerque, you can see the stars.
Yes.
And you go outside of that and you can really see the stars.
Yes.
And see how small you are and think about that and come up with some new strategy for new business and then come back into town and make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. But we have, you were talking about, is Jeff Bezos here? Or is it's just the Virgin one, right?
Virgin Galactic.
Yeah, Virgin Galactic's here.
Richard Branson.
Yeah, and then you have a lot with the Air Force that's going on here. So
Just talking to those folks, and it's interesting. New Mexico's been dependent on government money.
Right.
We talk about federal money coming in and then going out. It's 2 for 1. So what we produce as opposed to what we take in.
right,
Well, it employs people. There's functions for that. There's necessities that happen on base. But what else could they do? How could they further the space economy? They're stoked on that.
Right.
They want to redefine themselves, and then we can do that with our state too. I'm not running for state office, but I have to say that I'm finally seeing things take off here, and I have a lot of pride in this state.
that's awesome.
I'm a transplant, and
Right.
I know you are too.
You're right.
Technically, I came here when I was 15. We had traveled on those kind of old school Route 66 road trips.
Right, right.
And we came through New Mexico, and it just stuck for my parents and for me to an extent.
Right.
Moved down to Silver City, small town, a little too small, so I had to come up at least to Albuquerque to go
Right,
to college. Traveled around the world, and I keep coming back to this place. So I view it as my home base.
Right.
That's where I operate from. When I get inspired, I come back here. I can process it and come up with something that makes sense. I can actually operate. I can actually work, and that feels really good.
I think it's the same, like Seattle was just so, it's beautiful and amazing, but it would get dark at 3:30. You have 300 days of sun here. Up there, you have 300 days of rain. It's almost opposite. So I just was kind of burnt out with the whole, like the darkness, no vitamin D. So it's amazing. I wake up energized here, and it's just a different feel, a different vibe. I really enjoy. I feel like I can be more productive here. So I would say the same thing. I've only been here 5-6 years. So
The sun forces you to be productive.
yes. Yeah.
Drags you up, forces you to be happy,
I'm shining. You better be happy.
convinces you can do it tomorrow in the land of mañana.
So whenever you're looking at business, because I kind of want to get into this and then we'll kind of weave around, but whenever you're looking at business, especially tech companies that are, because we're starting to get I wouldn't say a surge, but we're getting, would you say a fair amount of tech companies that are coming to New Mexico now?
Compared to what we had, I go back to 2010, 2009, 2008. I had some kind of career in politics before then. So
Right.
working on a lot of national campaigns from here or statewide campaigns that were for national office. Tom Udall, our senator, Martin Heinrich, who's now a senator as well. Seeing that and really believing that I was going to be some kind of politician, but always wanted to start something, some new business. Also, I got really frustrated with politics and what kind of results you can get, what it takes to get smart policy going. It's just very difficult. And a lot of the decisions we make are on such trivial terms. They're on things that either don't matter or it's based on personal ego and conflict.
Yes.
And you see that at the national level, the polarization now. It's like a rivalry that has no basis in rationality almost anymore. It's moving away from that. So being frustrated with that, wanting to be involved in technology and business. And at that time, 2009, 2010, there wasn't a lot going on. When we founded Lavu, which is still an operation here in Albuquerque, that had no venture capital funding from the start. That had no real capital funding from the start. We had about 10 grand and we made it into something real. Well, that's a success story, but there's been a lot of ventures I've been involved with that haven't made that, haven't crested. It's very difficult to get something off the ground. But here in New Mexico, it's wide open. It's a green field for a lot of this. And finally that's starting to convert. People are seeing the potential for creative economy.
Right.
Netflix has seen it. They're bringing a lot of jobs here and this new production, but there's also the potential from that for spin-offs, people to subcontract and to create their own businesses. Also artists and the creative economy that's taking over large swaths of our new purpose. And I would say globally, but especially in America, what are we going to do next? If we're not manufacturing things, we're not really a service economy so much. We're moving kind of past even that. What does that mean?
Right.
So what are the new roles that humans can have? And Americans, we might lead the way in some of those models where we're saying, what is the creative inspiration you have now and how do you convert it to meet some need, to solve some problem, whatever that is. Artists they've always been at home here. A lot of writers, painters, designers, and that mindset lends itself to what we just talked about. You have these open skies and a green field and endless possibilities. The problem has been converting all this potential into something real. So not being dependent on federal dollars, not being dependent on government money, but really creating our own economy from the start. When we started Lavu, there was no tech scene. People didn't know what a tech startup was. I mean, I didn't really know what that meant either. And from that point, seeing it, feeling very lonely here, feeling very isolated, going to a place like San Francisco and wondering why that wasn't happening.
Right.
Well, we're at a point now where there are companies starting here and growing here and staying here. Even if they leave, they started here.
Yes,
There's
that's important. Right.
Mature, I would say more mature startups or ones that have already reached some kind of revenue and growth, they're relocating here because they love the lifestyle and they love you could say lower cost of operation, but really it's health, it's ability, I believe. We have resource that other places, they don't realize they have. I mean, our ability in this era of data to test things, to test new technologies, to validate automation tech or anything to do with environmental sensing, anything to do with oil and gas technology, it's possible here. And not because we have some looser regulations, but because we have all this land and natural resource and we have the flexibility to make that happen without a bunch of money being spent. So if you could scale here and validate your idea here, even fail a company here and learn what the next one's going to be, you're going to stick around and start again. And
that makes sense. Yeah, right.
Is.
And so when you're looking at New Mexico in particular, and we can look at Albuquerque, Santa Fe type area, are you seeing is there a spotlight on us right now? On the tech side of things, is Silicon Valley kind of looking at us, or our venture capitalists looking at us? What what are you seeing from the outside looking in at New Mexico? Is there people just kind of like, eh?
I would say it's a little better than but but not a lot.
Yeah, we're like probably 8th or 9th on the list.
Yeah,
hopefully
like
make
that.
the top 10. Yeah,
It's still a flyover,
right.
It's still seen as something that might have some novelty. That if something comes out of it,
Right.
it's unexpected. The problem I see with venture capital right now is it's a lot of incestuous investing. And there's these different levels of funding. But by incestuous, by definition, I mean it's the same people getting the same money, the
Right.
same funders,
Right.
and they fund serial entrepreneurs. Now, that can be of great benefit. But if those entrepreneurs aren't solving common problems, they're kind of staying in that bubble. And they're also just following a pure growth trajectory.
Yes.
I mean, if they're
Right.
all they're doing is trying to kind of pump up to the next round.
Right.
of
What is
funding.
the truth? What is the true outcome?
What value have you?
Yeah, and how are you bringing that value to society?
Yeah, well said. There's not a conversion to
Right.
affect most people. So the big leaps are not happening.
Right.
Now you go back to the 80s. Why did Bill Gates pass through here? Why did he not stick around other than getting arrested and things like that?
Right. Right.
There's reasons I think why it's people are able, entrepreneurs are able to actually start and grow companies here.
Right.
It's not seen as the first place VCs go to invest. It's not in their scouting necessarily,
Right.
unless something has some visibility. Now there's stories where a successful serial entrepreneur has transplanted here and brought that VC network with them essentially, so they can vet and vouch for other companies here to be funded. I think that's great because you get money coming in.
Yes.
You grow the company here. There's those kind of ancillary benefits where all these other companies around it benefit. All these local companies, local hires happen. People get imported, but that's great too. We don't want to turn anyone away. It's a benefit because we're taking that money in. It's being spent in the local economy and it's recycling here. So yeah, that's a bit of abstract language. All I see is reputable, valid tech companies happening here.
Right. Yeah, and now like because we have the Sandia Labs and then we have Los Alamos.
Huge.
So I imagine that is the maybe like incubator of a lot of tech companies that are here. Is there scientists coming out of there, or how are those two in because they've been here since what, the 1930s, 1940s?
The Manhattan Project essentially.
Yeah.
Los Alamos.
And how are they instrumental with tech companies?
There's a great success story. And of course, I'm biased. I was an advisor for Descartes Labs.
Right.
I was a strategic futurist. And
Right.
that company spun out directly from Los Alamos Labs. Those scientists emerged and they had this unique approach, obviously very intelligent, and they could keep iterating on it. Their core technology allowed them to serve I believe a core purpose and have a foundational role in this new era of data. So that's to say, how do you take all this data that's being generated, refine it, create a data refinery, and turn it into some kind of signal that's usable for a company or even a government? So you have this need to take all this buzz and information and all these huge data sets, satellite image data, for example,
Right.
which can get up to the petabytes of information.
Right.
How do you process that? How do you build models that serve that? So that company came from the scientists of Los Alamos, but that's not a common story. It's just starting to convert. One of the thesis that I'm thinking of is, and really focused on right now, what are the portfolio technologies in these labs, these national laboratories, that could turn into some kind of commercial play?
Right.
It's usually overlooked or it's seen as too much work, which I understand. Scientists want to do research and they're usually very comfortable in that.
But being entrepreneurial and a scientist at the same time.
It's scary.
Right.
So it takes a serial entrepreneur like Mark Johnson, who came out and joined Descartes Labs, took that, brought his capital network and really grew that. That enabled those scientists to have the structure
Right.
and the business models and the capital to make that possible. And then since then they've attracted, I believe they're over 120 people now. So imagine that kind of growth. That's not a call center. That's not some lower paying jobs. Those are PhDs and very gifted technologists,
Right.
and they're paying six figures. And that's really incredible to think that came not from a pure import, but matching imported talent with our grown New Mexico National Laboratory tech.
Yeah, and I want people to understand, because you explained it to me the other day, because I had read an article with them, just real quick, and I liked your windmill analogy. Basically, they could grab pictures from satellites, take all that data down to whatever, and then you could search all that data. You could say basically all the windmills of the world, and then it could produce all those pictures for you to look at. It could grab all that data and then produce it. So now here, okay, maybe there's 40,000 windmills. Well, here you go, and here's what they look like. 5 minutes ago?
That's right, and it's creating a digital twin of the planet and doing it every 5 minutes, essentially.
That is so crazy.
So imagine the potential there. It also brings up, I'm excited for who's already building digital twins of humans. It's exciting and scary.
Yes,
and I've written about that the human digital twin has great potential for good and evil, if you will.
So are you talking as far as like being able to have your twin in the cloud? Because I know, do you ever follow Lex Friedman?
Lex Friedman.
Yeah, he's the AI. He's a big AI guy, a scientist. Well, that's what he had quit MIT, and now he has a startup where he's trying to create her. In the cloud. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie or not, but that's his whole.
You're bringing back Lex Friedman's story.
Yeah. So when you think about that, it's like a digital twin. Like, are you like data wise, like it would be on the cloud of you, or what would that look like? Because I know you said you've written about it.
The dystopia here is what I've written about before, but I've been thinking more recently about the utopia side of that. So in futurism, in this being a futurist and predicting things, thinking about the two sides of an issue like that. So digital twins for humans, well, it's a tool.
Right.
It could be incredible. It could give us these graph databases that allow us to understand the complexity of an individual, honor their complexity.
Right.
It might be healthcare data where you can customize medicine for someone. You don't apply the same formulas that have mixed effects and might work for some people, and you don't know why it doesn't work for others. You have all these variables accounted for, and the outcomes for each person are great because
right.
they're honored in their particular situation, their environment, their genetics, all those variables.
Well, you could do experiments on the digital.
That's right.
Simulation. Yeah, you could do simulations. Let's not say experiments, but simulations, and then see how that medicine worked
without ever
right.
trialing the patient or testing on them and
right.
having some adverse effect. The other side of that is they can run simulations. What Amazon is doing to some extent, what even Netflix is doing with their data refinery. You're seeing more and more custom profiles.
I love that. Yeah.
Every action you take shows them what you might do next.
Right.
Now, over time, they start to build these prediction engines. They start to build these digital twins of you that start to tell you what to do next because they know you better. So they can hint at what you should do. And that's kind of scary to think there's a mirror person, if you will.
But it's still lagging though. It's being predictive, like in the sense of what you're doing. What will be interesting is when it will know future. Like it will know, it can take all your data points and turn around and say with a high probability, I know tonight you're going to be eating this. You know what I mean? As far as like, this would be the best movie that you would watch. Because out of 10 years of data, we know when your blood pressure's at this level and you worked 9.5 hours at work and you interacted with these 6 people because their phones were all next to yours, now we know that you're going to come in and this is going to be perfect for you, and that's scary. But I think at the same time, when you look at it, especially on, like they were talking the other day as they have these smart toilets, and I don't want to get too crazy, but that's amazing because every day you could be monitoring your body. You know what I mean? I mean, if you have a chip inside of you that's monitoring your blood, and then your waist, it's monitoring, I mean, think about that. In real time, it could be giving you data about yourself, not just like a Fitbit or something like that, but actual, I mean, that's just so interesting to me. Yeah.
That information advantage
Yes.
becomes yours, and you have all this new information you didn't have before. Now your choice is informed. But at some point that choice degrades, and where are the privacy concerns there? It's interesting to think too, what happens as we are more and more enabled
Right.
by these tools? Things like meditation and awareness, the practices of zooming out from the operative buzz of
Right.
daily life and feeling those manipulations or feeling those nudges towards something, being aware of that and seeing that. It's sort of a balance, because no matter what you've done before, you might choose to do something different, and you're not beholden to this choice.
But all those minuscule tasks that, bug the hell out of you, if those are taken care of, I mean, there's the negative and the positive, but, I'm thinking I could focus more on, if I'm not having to worry about that my fridge has the eggs that I like, I just know that they're in there. You know what I mean? They've been delivered and put into my fridge, and they know at that exact time, and we'll get into the Internet of Things, but they know at that exact time that I need eggs because there's only 3 eggs left, So, and I wouldn't even have to think about that. I don't have to make the trip to the grocery store. I don't have to feel disappointed because I really wanted eggs and they're not in my fridge and I forgot. So I think there's plus the subsets of data that you can see similarities. Like, for instance, if I'm getting my saliva tested every day, and they can see what type of race I am, where I'm originally from, they know all my DNA, that's a lot of privacy issues. But then at the same time, if there's 500,000 other people that are kind of like me, and then now we start seeing similarities of somebody before they get cancer, and then what's happening on a cellular level, now we've turned into data that is being extremely useful. Even though, but I always think, and I've heard somebody say this before, we'll always give up our privacy for convenience. So I think at the end that we're not going to have the privacy concerns, and you've been studying this a lot, and we talked about this yesterday, but hacking is an issue. And are we seeing it on a small business level? I mean, have you been seeing a lot of that, like cyber attacks? I know like your Chases, JP Morgan Chase, and all them have been attacked, but has it got to the point to where, because that seems for the future, that's going to be the threat.
It's a situation of endless attack now.
Right.
So but using the word attack seems it makes
Is it like a
scarier
pirate
than
data?
it is.
Just stealing data?
And what happens when you have it? Is it actually useful? What are the incentives for this?
Right.
When everything's connected to the same thing.
Right.
The essentially the internet is everywhere.
Right.
There's access points everywhere. There's follow-on effects. There's dependencies that we don't see.
Right.
So small businesses, especially with legacy systems, with outdated systems, they're vulnerable, but their information isn't necessarily valuable, but they might be connected to a larger system that is valuable.
Yes.
So global attacks, anyone can attack us from anywhere. There's no distance now. The physical distance has no meaning.
Right.
So someone in Ukraine and Russia, they can infiltrate a municipal system here.
Right.
And next thing you know, they've set off a bunch of the pumps to flood something else that shuts down a power plant. And next thing you know, a major city's in darkness.
Right.
That scenario is very possible. We shouldn't sit and think, gosh, well, we shouldn't connect anything to anything.
Right.
We should. That Luddite mentality stops us from realizing the benefits you mentioned. So if our data is online because of this interconnectivity, and we can access it and we can move it around, that's just the trade-off, and it's all this negotiation, but we have to be involved with it. I feel like, use the healthcare example. If someone steals your healthcare data, that's a scary thing. It could be used against you. It could be used to expose something that's private and and very uncomfortable to have out there. And and the trauma of that is very real. If you have something that society views as a stigma, you will be cast out of
like
many
stealing
places.
a psychologist's computer's notes, and then those being put online. Yeah.
and talked about masculinity and men. Well, one of the greatest insecurities is weakness in mental health.
Yes.
Admitting you have a problem there,
Right.
or admitting any kind of weakness there.
Right.
So imagine that exposure, what kind of violent reactions that might cause as we struggle with things like that. So I think there's a lot of benefit to this. For example, you have these siloed healthcare data systems where you might go to a clinical group and your profile information is limited to that group and it doesn't carry over to another hospital you go to.
Right.
That's why you're filling out intake forms endlessly and they don't know what this doctor prescribed. And here we are, the US, this incredibly advanced economy and country,
Yes.
struggling with our infrastructure. Well, we never even developed a unified identifier for people. People don't have a single way to say, hey doc, here's my health profile.
Yes.
Here's
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
everything that's happened to me. It's more like, well, you're in this system, so you can see what I've done here. And there's
Right.
all these gaps. I think that's ridiculous.
Yes.
How can we ever get to custom medicine if we don't share that data?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to overcome some of those fears. But the ability there, it has to be balanced with who is attacking and why. What does this mean? Accepting that, being comfortable with that kind of data transparency, it's a balance. No one has an absolute answer, and I'm not going to preach on anything. We have to discover it. So let's run some experiments, have an entrepreneurial mindset, keep it going, take some risks, and reap the rewards, and respond when things go awry, because all these systems are also designed to help us in
Right.
those situations.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the biggest things with everybody's worried about privacy is, like their and it seems kind of small, but like their DMs getting stolen or their pictures being taken off their phone, or we hear of celebrity hacks and all that, and everybody kind of has this big fear with their phone. Where when in actuality, when you look at it, I mean, I've had Chrome tell me my passwords may have been violated, change, Google or something like that. But in reality, the amount of data that I use and the amount of websites that I go to and all the passwords that I have with everything, I've never experienced anything. My credit card, I've had some issues with that, but other than that, it's been fairly safe for me on the internet. So I think we're doing a great job, with our data, and you may have a different perspective on it, but do you feel like there's a seriousness of the amount of data that's coming out? And because you were talking about like the Internet of Things, that we're going to have over 700 million, you were saying?
70 billion.
I mean, 70 billion. Yeah.
IoT devices by 2025. Yeah.
And an IoT device is the Internet of Things. So it'd be like my Fitbit I'm wearing, or the Samsung refrigerator that talks to, or is Alexa considered Internet of?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially the sensors within an Alexa unit. Geez, an Echo.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about too. So yeah, 70 billion. That means it's 10 to 1 things on the internet compared to people.
Wow.
So think about that ratio. And this isn't a Terminator scenario. The Alexa Echoes aren't going to somehow
attack us in the middle of the night. Yeah.
But those scenarios distract from, I think, the bigger issue here is
Right.
you use the term attack.
Right.
Attack to me says we're at war. We're in some battle.
Yes.
Yes, attacks happen. Someone's attacking or hacking a system, but there's a reason behind that. Why are we so worried about exposing certain parts of ourselves? And it's not to say if you have nothing to hide, no, I'd get crucified by privacy activists. But I think that it's worth really zooming out and thinking about the greater movement towards human compassion.
Yes.
And viewing data transparency as part of that. That we're all suffering with things. We all have different pains and fears. And
Do you think this may open us up?
Absolutely.
Data is going to open us up, you
It's
think?
forcing us to confront these kinds of uncomfortable things that
Oh, I like that perspective.
these
yeah.
are within, you might call it human nature, but maybe it's actually our culture and what the effects are. So
It's our
rather than
puritanical.
suffering-
It's it's like our puritanical. That's how the United States was. Don't show weakness, be strong. Even entrepreneurialism is that way. Like work 18 hours, 7 days a week. Don't be a pussy. This is what you got to do to be successful.
Very
And yeah, exactly. And so now you have people binging on drugs or, alcohol or whatever it may be, just to be able to get to a point to where they feel like they can be sustainable. You have a lot of people that I watched Elon Musk interview, and he was talking about depression and stuff like that. It's real.
So think about going back to politics. One of the things I saw, I have a lot of compassion for politicians. The anti-politics and anti-government movement right now, it's too simple. And I see those elements. When a system isn't working, I get why it's easy to just
attack the system, right?
Blame the system, but not participating in it when it still has power and relevance means things don't change. So I struggle with not voting or any kind of just purely anti philosophy.
Anarchist type view, yeah.
Whereas look at the fact, we talked about this fear of exposure and showing weakness. What happens now, especially at the national political level, someone running for presidential office, someone running at that level, they're fully exposed. They're opening themselves up to constant attack. It's a war.
Yes.
And there's no conscience a lot of times. There's no respect, as might have happened in previous times by the press for politicians.
Yeah, you have microphones everywhere now.
And whatever someone says anywhere, it has to be crafted, and they fall back on talking points, their tax returns, their personal lives, everything is uprooted. Now, people see that, and I believe that really has an effect where, gosh, I could never do that, or I'd never want to be in that situation. And they view politicians as liars, and look at what situations we put them into. It's extremely inhumane. It's that. But I think it's that, isn't it? Perfection.
Isn't it the kind of like because we've always looked at our presidents as being tall and wearing suits and being when the JFK started getting a scandal with Marilyn Monroe and affairs and stuff like that. And then, Bill Clinton with the issue, with him and Monica Lewinsky and all that. We always look at them as like being these high moral figures and like they should be that way. But like you're saying, with data, the transparency comes out and it's going to show all of our weaknesses, because that's happening every day with everyday humans.
Well, look at those two examples. So Jack Kennedy has these affairs, and the press knows the protocol is, well, you don't talk about that because there's an esteem to the president.
Right.
Bill Clinton does it, and all of a sudden there's this manufactured Whitewater controversy, and you have Ken Starr, and you have all these attacks happening, and this exposure unheard of, and impeachment based for those grounds. It would have seemed ridiculous, but now it's the reality. So that movement, you can take sides, and maybe my bias is coming through, or what party I worked for in the past, but I have to think that that's going to continue until we realize, well, these things have always existed. Now we're just more aware of them, or we're able to. People think it's okay to expose these things.
But data's not fake. I mean, you know what I mean? It shows it doesn't have, and that's really interesting to me what you said. I think you're right. I think it's because I'm already seeing that, like with the television that's coming out, the Netflix shows or Amazon or whatever, you're seeing a more realism, like struggles are there and more pronounced, and put out there, and people being unique is really celebrated, now. And I think that's what data is going, that's the positive aspects. I really like that, what you were saying, because it's going to force us to be more transparent. It's like if we all had Neuralinks and we could read each other's brains right now, I think over time it would just eliminate lying. It would eliminate a lot. If I knew it was in your head and you knew it was in my head right now, at first we'd be like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But after a while, we just as humans, we're evolutionary beings. We'd adapt so quickly.
Very true.
And it would just eliminate a lot of bullshit.
The fact that the generations, so coming up, are digital natives, and I'm amazed. It's easy to criticize when someone's always on their phone, or they seem governed by this inclusion metric of how many likes they have on Instagram for a certain post, and how they feel this constant need to do that. Well, they're adapting to survive in this new version of society that views inclusion as being part of these digital societies. So they have that requirement. They're also able to feel empathy and compassion for people that are literally on the other side of the world.
Yes.
And they've never met before.
Yes.
But they can see and understand their story and really listen to them. And even if it's for only a snippet, that's an incredible adaptive power.
Yes.
This didn't exist a few decades ago.
Right.
Even just a few years ago, it's greatly accelerated.
Wasn't there a Muslim woman that got on like YouTube or something like that, and she spoke out? I think she ended up getting a Nobel Peace Prize or something to help other women. But she used social media in a very, that to me, that is where, and then just spoke openly and frankly about what was going on, with women and helping women's rights. Something like that is what it's for. And that's what I tend to, because I have maybe it's just my personality, but I have an over optimistic view of social media. I think it's swinging really hard, and then we're going to create our own balance with it.
Oh, I love that concept. It speaks to the physics of this digital environment where there's different pendulums. I've also thought about the fact that sexism, racism, homophobia, these are all kind of their own pendulums. And it's not to say that there's overreaction.
Right.
It's to say that it's to be expected that all that buildup of abuse and trauma will naturally push that pendulum up to, on the other side, some kind of new awareness and over criticism.
I agree 100%.
Or again, I use the word over, but it's really this very sharp criticism that probably needs to happen. So finding that balance, well, we need to explore all the realms here. It's not scary.
Yeah, because you can go on Twitter and everything's extremely, far left. And then they got woke culture and all this stuff going on now. And you look at some of these extremes, and then you've got, especially on the political side, then you have, social media companies going against the far right, which I always tell people I'm pretty open to how, socially I'm left. Maybe I'm a little bit more conservative on the fiscal side of things, But I look at it in the sense of saying, we are at this point, we are at a reflection point, I feel, where we're starting to figure out, and I think this younger generation, they call them, like they had a study the other day that millennials really don't, they're staying at their jobs longer than we thought. Like they're actually, once they find a company that the culture matches with them, and they're looking at, okay, if it has the right culture, they're supporting not-for-profits. And I'm thinking, okay, my parents were all about moving up the corporate ladder and how much money we're going to make. And then you look at this young generation, it's like, how much time can I spend going hiking? How much time can I spend, with my dogs? What is the culture of work and what not-for-profits? Is that a bad thing? You know what I mean?
Think about the message that was carried all through the generation before.
Yes.
My goal is to make my children's lives better.
Right.
I want to make enough money so they go to college. Then the reality hit that, well, these liberal arts degrees or the 4-year college isn't for everyone. And if you make it through, and even if you go on to graduate school and sometimes now even medical school,
right,
you're left with all this debt. Mm-hmm. Well, how is your life better? I'm proud of that generation, whatever you want to call that generational mindset, or just that mindset, really, because generations kind of divide us, those dividing lines. I believe that. And here they're taking on that mantra, well, I'm supposed to have a better life.
Yes.
To me, this is what a better life is. It's not making more money. It's the experience of living.
Yes.
I really treasure that. And it's not to say that the generations or that other mindset wasn't needed at some time,
right,
or didn't build that resource and capacity. Now it's being used, and it shouldn't be vilified.
No, I don't think so, because consumerism is being questioned, materialism, all these, religion, just like this blind, view, and, whether religious or not, whatever, everybody has their own thing. But at the end of the day, politics, people, what is the disdain for politics, from 30 and under? And what would be their viewpoint, looking at on the political landscape? I think you're going to see 15, 20 years from now, a totally different America.
There's a seminal work for futurists. Alvin Toffler in 1970 wrote Future Shock. He wrote other books, but that's the one I've read, so I'm going to stick to referencing that. And he talks a lot about what is this disease of future shock? How does it manifest? What does it mean? So at that time, it's very prescient that you can see when he talks about subcults, essentially people identifying with things outside of these traditional groups.
Externally, yeah.
And it changes.
Right.
Things are changing so fast that they're building these new adaptive skills, and they're constantly challenged for that. So that cognitive ability to adapt, it's either kind of sink or swim. And
Right.
that's the reason why you have to travel and relax and practice jujitsu and do all these other things.
Right.
You can't sustain that kind of constant adaptation and change. In your
Which I got to let people know. I got to interrupt you. I got to let people know he has a black eye. I don't know if you'd be able to see that on the video there. Yeah, he has a black eye from jiu-jitsu. You didn't have a girl angry at you. It was you actually got a black eye from. Were you rolling, or did you just like move quickly, or?
Yeah, it was an open mat, and that's one of the fun things I believe in that practice is you can drill and train and compete, but the open mat situation, it's a bunch of people usually from different schools,
Right.
Maybe from the school where it's being hosted, but they have these different mentalities. So you
Yes.
can feel literally, you feel the ego, or you feel
If they're aggressive,
Anger.
or yes, yeah,
and it comes through. And it's still a male dominated sport.
Right.
But women are participating much more.
more, yeah, a
And-
lot more frequently.
And it's growing. And
Yes.
I love that it's a science, it's an art, it's a chess match. I got the black eye because a kid was just too frantic, and I think too overwhelmed by the pressure of this crowded open mat to kind
Right.
of prove himself.
Oh,
and I could
right,
feel
right,
that.
right.
And it's not his fault. It's also on me to say I need to communicate the pace of this role. So that kind of communication, that physical communication is really needed too. Jiu-jitsu is such a beautiful chess match in that way. This happens about once a year, and it's all good.
Right.
I might have reacted differently years ago.
Why do you like? Because I know people that I talk to that have, man, I don't know you that well, but I can see kind of a little bit of your brain, and a lot of people are drawn to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And like you talk about chess, what are some of the things that you've learned from it? I mean, because you've been doing it, what, 15 years, you said?
Yeah, off and on. I've certainly had injuries, and it's taught me to respect my body.
Right.
I've had injuries outside of jiu-jitsu that prevented me from doing it. So
Right.
when I say off and on, it was forced absence, and then it also really made me appreciate it when I could do it.
Yes.
What an incredible thing to not just compete, but really learn in that way, to have that kind of mobility and physical movement, and appreciate physics and dynamics as they translate through your body. So that's abstract, but I've learned how to read people. I've learned how to communicate, how to stay calm.
With pressure, yeah.
Yeah. How to be compassionate too.
Right.
Because I think it's a good release, especially for men, that they don't know how to get stress out. And it can be dangerous in those situations. Mixed martial arts, especially, I've trained with a lot of those guys, and there's a lot of natural aggression because you add striking in there. And if
Right.
you take it back just to the level of jiu-jitsu, you're not allowed to punch people in the face.
Right. right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But you are submitting. So if you hold an arm bar, or you go too deep in it, or you hold a choke and the guy passes out, that's a sign that the person applying that submission needs to do some other work. So I view it as this series of prompts. What I
Right.
learn is what it tells me I need to investigate. Because if I'm too aggressive that day,
Right.
or if I'm too hesitant, why? So I really lean into it. What am I scared of? What am I angry
It's a
about?
self-awareness practice.
Oh, so much. It's like a very active meditation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. So when you are looking at the future, and we can say tech companies, whatever you want, and we're looking at this. I don't know if you would use the word surplus of data that's going to be coming. What are some of the things that you're concerned about with that? I know you had talked about, and you're working on a project with the Internet of Things and security and stuff like that, but when you're seeing these Internet of Things and this amount of data that we're creating, like they were talking like a Tesla car can create as much data as a teenage girl can on her phone in like a couple seconds. So I mean, they were making a joke about that, but it's true. I mean, that car with all of its computing systems in it are sitting there transmitting so much data. self-driving cars and all that. What are you seeing as far as concerns with that?
Well, it's not really a concern, but it's a technical limitation right now. Is, as you said, maybe too much data is coming online. Well, how do we process it? How do we refine it? So that's a point to say every business should have a data refinery. Every single business. It doesn't matter what you do. Every business is a tech company. That was said for a while. Now every business creates data. So even if it's simple things, even if it's a traditional or conventional, whatever that means anymore, as the world changes, business, they still have data points and they still need to participate. So that leads into I'd say the real concern is who has the information advantage here? Because the new global economy depends on that.
Yes.
If you have information advantage, you control markets.
Right.
So who is controlling markets? Who has the ability to translate this data faster and essentially live in the future? So who controls these predictions? Who knows what's going to happen? Who can trade on that? Because the risk I see is that then the accumulation and monopolization of wealth takes off, and it becomes, you have trillionaires, you have the Gini coefficients become unsustainable. The discrepancy between rich and poor becomes so vast. And here we have this incredible opportunity to, it's an overused term, democratize, but really it's about spreading the potential of the future.
Right.
And that's possible with our data technology. But if it's controlled by a few, or if that information advantage ends up falling to a few, then it doesn't, that amazing utopia vision fades away. And we end up with this kind of control and freedom and this battle for it. So if we have more people coming online, and more people being born into this world, if the human population continues to increase, what does that mean when data is the currency of the world? Who controls that?
Because if it's not already, it's going to be.
Absolutely. Supply chains, raw resource extraction, production, processing, that will all be automated.
Yeah, and
so
it'll be,
really
and that's that's a lot of people don't realize, but that's how blockchain, you can take that information and put that, and transmute that back and forth in a lot of different varieties of ways without getting too technical. I'm not like an expert in that, but I know if you're a company in Australia and I'm a company here and I want to exchange money with you, I want to purchase items from you, I want to have a shipping log with you, we can do that all through data in a blockchain. So it's just not a one ledger going back and forth. There could be tens of thousands of ledgers in that one piece of data that's being transmitted to you. And simultaneously, that could go back and forth as it's being analyzed. So data is the currency, or will be.
It really already is, and it's what we do with it. The data marketplace that's maturing now. That's going to be where the power of the world moves.
So what like China just scares the hell out of me when I think about that, because you have a government that seems to not have a moralistic compass.
Well, you mentioned trading convenience, for security or privacy. Also, there's a different philosophy. The quality of life in China has been increasing consistently.
Yes.
And it's not for everyone. Certainly there's minority populations and even large swaths of that population that are suffering and not seeing those benefits. It's not just that they're kept poor, but there's discrimination. And there's a type of suffering there that is applied in a much more heavy way and heavy in a very heavy-handed way to certain populations and parts of that country. Well, those consumers, the ones that are benefiting, if they're constantly seeing an increase in their quality of life, especially coming from the generation before that suffered through a lot of the Cultural Revolution and remembers starvation, remembers that hard life. Now kids have enough protein and nutrients, and when I was over there this last summer, there were young Chinese men who were inches taller than me. And I think a few decades ago, I would have stood out.
Yes.
Well, that's all changing, and those are all
You can see Louis
visible.
Vuitton stores and Chanel,
and
yeah.
that's even part of it. But imagine that, that core. Wow, there's enough nutrition to grow, and this is the potential.
Yes.
Or not that we're judged by our height, the value to height or anything like that. It's really to say that there's enough there to see change. That things are that there's measures for those people to judge their improvement. Also, the social credit system. Why would you refuse that if it benefits you? It's the people that are left out, and there's not enough of them to protest that. You have this captive consumer population, a tremendous data refinery, if you will. So their advantage and how they can so quickly advance things, they are over leveraged, their economy. It's built on a lot of nebulous metrics and numbers
Right.
and credit, but they are able to move so fast because they have the trust and the compliance and the feedback of this captive population.
where we're having Mark Zuckerberg, stand before a committee and questioning data, that would never happen there. It's just we're taking your data and using it for the best of the republic. So, I don't that if you don't think moralistically, that right there will cause you to win in the data world. Because you can take that data and do whatever you want. Yeah. And I've heard that they're like 10 years ahead of us.
Data companies,
I don't know if that's true or not, but
it certainly felt like it. But that's also the impression they want to give. I remember a scenario being on the subway, and everything was so precise.
right.
There was I couldn't believe it. I remember thinking, well, this is Beijing. Aren't there supposed to be just so many people here that I'm supposed to be pushed onto these subway
Yes,
trains?
exactly.
There's
Yeah,
not enough room.
right.
But they solved that by just increasing the frequency and adding and building more lanes and lines. Well, it would happen that one train would come in to the station. I would watch it come in, or maybe I'd be coming down the steps and, the train just pulled away, thinking about, New York City. Well, that means I'm going to wait for, who knows how long, 20, 30 minutes for the next train. If it's a downtime, at least 10 minutes, certainly. Like, I missed that and I'm going to be late for something. It was seconds. I could hear the next train coming, to the point where I was thinking, what if something happened? What if there was a derailing, or, even just something smaller where they had to stop for something?
Right.
And there didn't seem to be enough time for the next train to slow down. They would crash into each other. It was, let's just get things moving. They don't worry about the implications of endless, crazy, extreme growth.
Right.
So yeah, they are ahead of us in some ways. And morals and ethics, it's arguable what those trade-offs are. What are the benefits there? There's definite violations.
Yeah, because I know the head of the NSA had said, or the previous head or whatever had said that just about every computer has Chinese malware in it. And so that's interesting to me to think, okay, and then you have that big cell company with the CEO's daughter or something like that being imprisoned in Canada, or I don't know the whole story with that. What's their cell phone?
Huawei.
Yeah, Huawei. Yeah. And then there was an issue in Belgium or something like that where they were taking, they were going into computers and taking their information, and then they were paying people off, in the government to be able to, turn. So is that their game? Is that China's game, is to not think of tanks and big carriers and missiles, but to say, if we can control data, we'll control the currency of the world?
Well, they're doing both as a show of power. I think those Cold War instincts will remain. We do the same thing.
Yes,
we
right.
maintain a Cold War based structure. You may have served in some of them.
Yes.
That is kind of silly, but we look both ways. Well, cyber war is where it's at. You're right, but you have to maintain that image that appeals to, in that case, traditional Communist Party members and their Politburo. And I feel like we're at this point now where Huawei is limited. They're being challenged on being the providers for European 5G networks because they're worried about those concerns. Again, this is a big prompt to say, in this supposedly interconnected, interdependent global economy, why are we still defined as East versus West? Why is that still the measure of whether or not we should trust a country. So they define themselves and us as adversaries. This trade war that kicked off, it just deepens those kinds of divisions.
Yes, right.
So if we're really that interdependent, if you can see the data of what a supply chain goes through, China is a crucial part of this. It's why the trade war is unsustainable.
Right.
You can't hurt them without hurting yourself. So we're at a point now where our systems are interdependent, our resources to produce anything, it takes a global community in a sense. So if you disrupt anything, and you can see this, one of the cool things with satellite and AI data technology, you can see supply chains being disrupted. You can predict or respond quickly to those disruptions. Geopolitical, what happens on borders when there's conflicts that prevent oil from getting to a place, that prevent a factory from running because they don't have the fuel to do it or the transportation to move things. And it's a ripple effect. The same with hacking and cybersecurity. One system compromise stops the entire global economy, essentially.
Yes.
So those risks are real. And if we don't acknowledge that and we keep to these national country divisions, those aren't compatible. So I think at some point that's going to cause the real harm.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, like, Putin was, when Ukraine and Russia were having their little issues, he was attacking the banking systems. Like, from Russia, he was sitting there attacking him, and then billions of dollars got mysteriously transferred out, and these. So I mean, he's like, okay, the company's going through, whatever Ukraine. What was it? Was it more of a civil war, or what would you call it? What was happening over in Ukraine? I don't know, because I know northern Ukraine was all Russian nationalists, and then when you look at Ukraine, they were wanting their freedom, and then we were kind of stuck in this. NATO had to look at it and say, yeah, we'd love to make a North and South Korea. We'd love to do that, but we don't want to poke the bear too much, in that arena. So he came in, and it was all, he has that new facilities. They even have it on YouTube where he's being proud of all the cyber, so because Russia always seems like the proverbial mafia to me, like the, so like, this is like right up their alley. Let's attack systems. And then you always hear Russian hackers,
Yeah.
And with Facebook, we had that, with them, with the political system.
Think of that power. For me, it's a pretty clear incentive. If their economy is a fraction of what ours is, how do you have an impact? And here's this incredibly, essentially low cost way to wage incredible war and cause tremendous damage.
Mm-hmm.
But what they proved in Ukraine was that you can shut down entire parts of a country.
Yes,
you can create tremendous havoc, and that's how.
Or you're starving the people for food.
And geez, Ukraine is their history. I mean, from the time the Soviet Union caused the Great Starvation in the 30s,
yes,
the breadbasket of that region. They were starved out of their natural resources. They've been in conflict and in suffering for almost all their history. And now the most recent thing, it's now cyber war. You can't trust ATMs, and you can't trust your cash machines and credit cards and banking systems to work because Russia might be attacking them.
Right.
If you can do that to Ukraine, again, physical distance is no protection. So any older system in the US and probably any new system too is susceptible to that. Now, why does that exist? The mafia of Russia, I'm not sure how to solve that.
But I think it goes back to what you were saying, is the responsibility of humanity. And I think data it only reveals who we are. It's like, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about how bad Snapchat is. I'm like, Snapchat is not bad. It has nothing to do with that the messages disappear. You're using that platform in that format because you're doing something that is dishonest to yourself. Because like so many people will look at Snapchat is that there's nothing moral about a message disappearing. You could actually be very useful if you're, talking to somebody and there's a security issue, or you want to be very personal with somebody and then have that. Now that you're in a monogamous relationship and you choose to say, for better, for worse, till death do us part, I'm going to be faithful to you. And then you're on Snapchat sitting there, DMing another girl, that's on you. That data and everything that's being exchanged, those pictures that are being exchanged, whatever it is, that is just a platform. How we use the platform is really the question, I think. and I want, because I kind of want to get into this a little bit because before we close out, is you wrote a book, and I want people to know that. What's the title of the book?
Oh, it's in progress.
Oh, it's in progress.
So
okay. I can't go on Amazon and buy it right now.
I wish. It's been a multi-year process, and I feel so. Yeah, even the title's in progress, but the themes here are yes, masculinity, but also just the larger complexity of individuals. Simplification really bothers me. It always has. Also, my own trajectory as a man, sharing what some of this pain or suffering might be. As a white boy, what does that mean? What's this context and place in the world, and sharing what I'm seeing and feeling and hearing. That doesn't happen a lot with a lot of genuine, a lot of authenticity.
I don't think it's. I think it's just people reacting. I don't think. I heard, Penn and Teller, the magicians, and he was talking on a podcast today, and he goes, he said, I think 99.9% of humanity is good. He goes, I guarantee I could just randomly take my Tesla, walk into a Starbucks, throw the keys up in the air, say my wife is pregnant. Can somebody park this Tesla? I have an Uber coming and that's rushing me to the hospital. I can't drive. I need to be with her in the back seat. He said, 99% of people, when I toss those keys up in there and somebody grabs them, they're going to make sure my car is fine. And I think that is, I think we're coming upon, like you said, and I like that you brought that up, like white boy, let's say, for instance, or whatever, it doesn't matter. What do you do? You know what I mean? Because there's shaming and all this stuff that's going on now. And what is masculinity? Because I enjoy watching MMA fighting, is that something that I shouldn't be a part of? I was in the Marine Corps and I enjoy shooting an AR, is that an identity of my masculinity? I've got tattoos on my arms. I mean, there's all this level of, and as a guy, I mean, we'll just talk to the guys for a little bit. As a guy right now, you really don't know where you should be. You know what I mean? It's like, what is good? What is bad? All those questions are up in the air right now. And so I think a lot of guys are just reacting and just not even, giving two fucks, So in the book, what is it? Is it is it hitting all these issues, or
good and bad? The 99.9%. Well, what about 100%? This kind of complete ownership, complete compassion. What does that mean? Looking at everyone as having context. So this goes all the way back to those individual graph databases and profiles, digital twins.
Right.
Well, who are we? If we can define certain parts of ourselves completely for the purpose of consumption and being sold to and being marketed to, what if you could really understand someone else, or have that mindset that there's a reason why they're angry?
Yes.
And when they're angry, their cognition narrows. They're not saying things that they actually feel or believe. Right. They're reacting as an animal to a situation. And men often feel themselves in those situations more. And they're ruled by that. There's competition, there's war, there's being in these situations, and we don't know what masculinity means except for these old definitions of, well, it means not showing weakness, it means being strong,
not being feminine,
whatever that means.
Whatever that, yeah, it's like,
and maybe emotions are feminine. So let's not really discuss that and push anything out of our mind, or just get angry if we're not being heard or understood, or whatever that means. We react with these simple these simple reactions. Show that we're being simplified, and it's not that we haven't had a good run or whatever that means. we've had a lot of power and privilege. The thing now is we're committing suicide at alarming rates.
Yeah, that's especially in the military. I've noticed that's like tremendous.
There's reasons for that. Mm-hmm. There's reasons behind that. It's not just some random phenomenon.
Right.
So I'm trying to dig down into some of these things, and I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to preach or try to simplify the situation by sharing my own complexity. It's just an exercise. It's how I kind of help myself in that journey and that story. So that to me is an important thing. I wish more people would do that. And when I hear other men talk that way, when I hear anyone talk that way, women have led in emotional intelligence, and I think that makes a lot of men angry because they wish they had that ability, but we all do. I believe that.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but I was talking to somebody the day and we were talking about a man, and I'm like, this person's very feminine, that they're, but extremely smart and intelligent and amazing person. So why am I looking at them? I had to look at myself. It's like, why am I judging him, whether he's, gay or not, or whatever? It doesn't matter. Why am I sitting here looking at this man and saying that he's lesser of a man?
You use the term "but."
Yes. Yeah.
So as some kind of qualifier.
Yes.
Yeah, you can be feminine, but that means this, because that pre-existing definition.
Yes.
You learn that somewhere.
Yes.
I think it's really important that looking back, what movie did I watch? What did my father teach or not teach me? Where else did I have to go? When did I feel abandoned? What kind of pain and hurt am I dealing with? Not because it's any more important than anyone else's.
Right.
It's because hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
That's really important to understand, that it's not about being ridiculous or that it doesn't matter. It does matter because it's having an effect on other people.
But we've all hurt people. So we're all in the same boat. So why, that's my thing. It's like, why my level of what I view as a man, being a man, you know what I mean, is it's got to be skewed from our past, or it's, that's something that I've really been trying to be self-aware of, is the amount of judgment that I do daily towards people, and then how I look at them, or how I see the way they talk, or, maybe a guy acts a little bit more feminine than than what I think he should be. So then I in turn think that, he's not, like you had the Navy SEAL guy come out, saying that he was gay or whatever. It's really interesting when you heard the comments. You can go on YouTube with look at that video and then scroll through and see these comments, just so horrific. You know what I mean? We all don't want to look at troll comments anyways on YouTube, but you look at that, it's like, is he any lesser of a man? So then I'm looking at, oh, okay, he's gay, but then he's a Navy SEAL, so that's badass. You know what I mean? It's like
another qualifier.
But I'm seeing, this is where, when I talk to other men, that there's these questions that they're going to have to answer within themselves, or what. There's this process, and I think men right now are confused. Where do we go from here? You know what I mean? The world is rapidly changing. What was a simpler life, where by the time you were 16, 17, 18, you go in the military, then you come back and you buy a home, and you go to work 9 to 5, and that's what you do. You drink scotch and smoke a cigar at night, and then you go to bed, with your wife. That's just what you did. And you had 2-point-something kids, and you go out in your garage and hang out and work on your engine. But it's changed dramatically.
We talked about future shock and change. Everybody else has had to deal with a lot of change.
Right.
And for the first time, guys that look like us have had to face those things, that story can't repeat. And it makes us angry, because that's something we look forward to, probably.
Right.
Or that's something we defined as valuable. And we had purpose. So our purpose, our role in the world, it's being challenged. It's changing. And we're frightened. So I do believe the root of anger is fear. And that's something that there's a lot of fear out there. I experienced that. I did a series of interviews and a road trip across the US back to where I grew up. And that's what kind of led to this book, the origins of it. A series of blog posts asking people where was home for them, what do they think has changed. And every time I talk to men, especially older men, I was driving, I still drive an old 65 Buick. They were drawn to that. They remembered it, and they would start conversations.
Nostalgia, yeah.
They would talk about how things ain't the way they used to be.
Right.
And I don't know what's going on with the world today. So what you said, confusion, fear, and that would make them angry. That would, whenever challenged on something else or whenever confronted, they respond with anger instead of trying to understand, because they feel threatened and they don't feel like anyone else hears that or understands that. So it's not that everyone needs to drop what they're doing and listen. It's that they have to investigate themselves too,
and what how the fear and where it's coming from. Maybe
do their own work.
Yeah,
really connect and talk to friends too. That I think it's I know the stats. It's a trend. Men feel lonely.
Yes,
especially
exactly.
older white men.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. I mean, I've felt that kind of trend in myself, where it becomes easy to isolate almost.
Yes.
And whenever you feel challenged, that's not right. Like, you have friends for a reason. There's natural connection between men. Jiu-jitsu is a good way to connect.
Yes.
It kind of breaks down all those barriers.
Right.
you roll with somebody, it's very humbling.
Yes.
A smaller guy, a bigger guy, it doesn't matter. Women, when they participate, it strips away all the awkwardness because it's about physics and dynamics, and it's about the art form and the chess match.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're connected. It's really important to have that physical connection and have that kind of humility with each other. So it's not that jiu-jitsu solves everything, but there's tools like that. There's other things like that for each guy.
Yeah, and I think as data becomes more open, and then we start seeing that we're not as screwed up as we think we are, or that we're all screwed up together. I think you're going to see that. I think that will change. But I think in the meantime, I mean, as I talk to men, it seems to be like this. And I think you hit the nail on the head. There's fear, and with that fear, where I draw lines, and there comes pride instead of the humility of understanding. Because I think there's a desire for men to kind of figure it out, but then you have, the woke culture on one side, on the far left, and that's telling you all these things are bad. Like things that we would revere as masculinity, things that I even like, a lot of that's bad. And then you go to the far right side, and it's a religious, moralistic Christian right, type. And then there's lots of things that are bad with that, So it almost seems like there's these extremes, and there's a side that you have to pick, where somebody may, it's like the other day I saw on Instagram, Sylvester Stallone, he's an amazing painter. And he's been painting for like 30 years. And his paintings are like through the roof, the amount that they cost. And he has tons of paintings on his Instagram. But we always think of Sylvester Stallone's like Rambo, like
Rocky,
yeah, and Rocky and stuff like that. Or you get Clint Eastwood, who's a jazz musician. There's these sides of men that I think that we like to hide. You know what I mean? Or we want to, we look at Bill Clinton, amazing communicator. I mean, whether you're far right or left, it doesn't matter. Everybody admits that Bill Clinton was probably one of the best communicators out there. And his memory is absolutely perfect. He can give a speech with no notes and just start talking. You've probably heard him talk numerous times, but he can give a speech and just talk and start bringing up history. He loves history, and start bringing up, things that were happening politically in the 1800s and where it went and his perspective on things. Or you take a Bush Senior who, was shot down in war and stuff like that. It's our John Wayne. We look at Ronald Reagan, we look at all these personas of what men is. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But then we have this whole new frontier ahead of us. And what does that look like? So masculinity has a big question mark on it, I think, right now.
I think it's a good thing. We're finally challenging it. What does it mean? And it's good to start from scratch. It's good to not be simplified and figure it out for ourselves.
The complexity is good. So I think
lean into it.
So is it, so you have blog posts and stuff on this? Or, I mean, is it you just trying to discover masculinity for yourself? Is it more of a story of that? Or what do you, like, what is the purpose behind the book that you're writing?
Well, if hurt people hurt people,
right?
I don't want to hurt anyone. I want to understand why I have some of the behaviors that I don't like. The road trip was a start to it. It was a lot of prompts. I noticed myself. I was forced to be on my own and survive, if you will, on the road, and then realize that I had a lot of privileges out there. But I also, learning about history, learned a lot. And that led me to lean into my family history, all these assumptions I had growing up.
Right.
Which really interested me. So it's not so much about masculinity as it is my own complexity. Why do I believe the things I do? And why do a lot of these things threaten my happiness and even my life? It's one thing to say, I think it's too easy to say it's ridiculous that someone who is in a position of relative stability and security should ever be depressed. Someone who has any kind of stability in the world should feel depression or even feel suicidal. That doesn't make any sense. So that's ridiculous. So it can't happen. The reality is that those things happen. There's feelings there, and they need to be analyzed, and there's root causes to them. So when I go back to my family, there's momentum there. There's images and idealization. There's these heroes that I aspire to, or these times that I want to live in and want to recreate.
Yes.
That all causes problems and creates character. My identity isn't truly defined. I'm kind of challenging that. So I'm not assuming things anymore. And the simplicity of being told who I should be like or who I am, that's for me to figure out and for me to own too.
Right.
And for me to fix or change really, because fixing means you're broken. And really it's about recognizing when you're causing harm to yourself and others and moving past that. So it's not so much about this huge reconciliation of all these things, but I've learned so much and I want to share that. I want to be really honest and vulnerable and show that that's possible.
Yeah. And well, I commend you for that. I mean, that's huge. I wish more men would look at that and see that there's strength in that.
Well, it's an aspiration. It's very difficult. And I'm not saying even the final version of this thing, it's probably going to have some muting because
Right.
I'm on so many drafts and it's taken so long because I read it and this, that's not true. I'm putting on, I'm being a politician or I'm, whatever that is.
The ego speaking right now or something.
Yeah. I don't want people to judge me.
Right. Oh, so yeah. I wouldn't have even thought about that. Like what happens if somebody else reads this and they're reading this part and
how scary, but how true. So
right.
Pursuit of truth.
But in this world now, I think vulnerability and truth is what speaks the most. When everything is like Instagram fake, and there's filters for everything. And when somebody's honest and truthful and vulnerable, we stop and listen. And that's why I love the new Heineken commercial. I don't know if you saw it or not. Have you seen that yet? Where they're building so Heineken beer, you just be like, whatever. But they have this commercial on YouTube and it's amazing. So they take they take a woman that's far left and she's lesbian. And then they take a guy that is far right and he's Christian and they have to build, they have to build a bar together, and they're going to get like a prize or whatever. So they sit there and they work together, but they don't know their political leanings or anything of what they are, their lifestyle or any of that. Well, they begin to like each other as two people. And then they begin to work together as two people. And then at the end, they're all, hugging each other and all excited. So then they take them into a room and they show them the video that they made about their political views and who they really are. I'm putting my fingers in quotations for people that can't see this. And it's like embarrassing. After they got to know the person, when you see a guy talking against homosexuality, talking it in that way, in that format, and then he's sitting there next to her and he said that about her. And then she's sitting there talking about how angry she is towards, the right and all that. And then to me, that's beautiful because that's where now it's like, I feel really stupid. I can't believe I judged this person off of these biases, And I think our political system is going to break because of that, because that's what it's built off of, And I don't want to get into politics for sake of time, but and you were ingrained in that and aspiring to be that. But when you look at where we're at now politically, I think it's just those pendulums swinging both sides extreme, and then it's just going to fall off and break because it's just it's getting too extreme. I always joke like on the woke culture and all that. That's just people that don't have a religion that are creating a religion of intolerance. The right has always had it, with, the moralistic majority and all that stuff, and claiming the Bible or whatever you want to use for that, whatever extremist fundamentalists there are out there. And you have that and they have those certain beliefs and then it takes the freedom of the individual. But when you look at what's going on now in America, I'm excited about people like you who are being self-aware enough to where they're starting to say, okay, here's where I'm at. Here's personally, I don't care about anybody else. Personally, here's what's going on inside of me, and I'm going to work on me. And then hopefully I don't hurt someone, however, scale of 1 to 10, whatever that is. It could be relationship or whatever that may be. But it's just really exciting to see that work. And that's why I kind of want to bring it up. I know we're futurism and all that stuff, but when I talked to Alex, and he told me what you were writing and stuff like that, it was really intriguing to me because anytime there's vulnerability, people take notice. And, that takes a lot of courage to express that out in writing like that.
People have dealt with many things, and these situations that I haven't experienced, take probably more courage, and they're tried with events and circumstances that I really can't imagine, because I'll never live that life and I'll never have that. But what I'm thinking about now is, and I appreciate that, it's really an aspiration to say, what is the unique series of circumstances that I've experienced? What is my experience? What are the stories I've told myself? And then really look at that, pull outside myself and ask why. Why is that what I'm saying? Why is that what I believe? The idea here being that everyone has that, and it's my job, it's my duty as a person to explore that.
Right.
Because if I'm going to, rather than lecture other people on who they should
be, exactly,
understand myself and really come to this awakening of who I should be.
Right.
And then that's really my job. That's my purpose. So maybe that's what men should do for the next few decades.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you 100%. It's so hard to not go through life and judge, So I think
only because it makes for great conversations. I got to say, like, it makes for great friendships. I mean,
right. No, I'm just excited, and because I think I read the other day, 35 and younger, the leading cause of death now is suicide. So there's an issue that our society is facing, especially here in America, where there's just so much confusion, I think. And it all comes down to, you're talking about meditating earlier, and that's something that I've gone on and off, and I struggle with, with my ADD brain, if you want to call it per se or whatever. But I've learned in those moments, the clarity that you get is amazing, and so much has been revealed in who I am as a person and as a man. And to question those things is not bad. It's actually helping you mentally, when you begin to open up. And like I said, we're not psychologists or anything like that, but I know when I can sit there and say, why am I angry towards this person when they said this? And then to be able to take the time before reacting, to be able to take the time and to allow myself to, because it's the same in jiu-jitsu, you can sit there, brute force you will not win. Getting emotional, and displaying brute force, you're going to lose. Oh. And then a person that is sitting there watching and knowing, and then begin to anticipate that person's going to win.
And
in their calmness.
Aware. Yes. And that's a perfect analogy, because you end up hurting yourself or hurting someone else.
Yes.
I mean, this black eye, maybe there's a root there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been cool. I'll have to have you back on whenever you have some time. Maybe we can get into this a little bit more, because we've already done an hour and a half.
Cheers, Jason.
And I knew it would be, I knew it would be this way. I figured it would be, and we've kind of touched surfaces of everything. But I'm excited about your future. I think you've got a lot of great things going on. And your hands have been into so many things, and I like your viewpoint of what the future is. Are you going to write a future book? Have you thought about that as a futurist, about like writing what's going to happen? Or
wow, when I read Future Shock, I think about the amount of work you put into it. I do still write articles, so I'll probably keep to that.
You enjoy writing blog posts and stuff, or?
There's things that need to be addressed, and I think about, is this worth saying
right
before I write it out? There's a few things that I think I might have an opinion people want to hear, or just prompts. That's really helpful. What am I thinking about? And start those conversations.
Right.
A good futurist, I think, starts dialogues. Doesn't try to come up with solutions, but asks the right questions. So
yeah, I think it's through that. How could people follow you? Are you on any social media, or?
My website, traviskellerman.com, and then all the main channels at Travis Kellerman.
Okay,
yeah,
cool,
very,
perfect.
Very, very creative.
No, I'm the same way. I have it the same. So they can go to traviskellerman.com, and then it has your blog posts and all that in there?
Yeah, links to my Medium.
Oh, okay. Oh, your Medium. Yeah, that's right. We were talking about that yesterday. Yeah, that's great. I just discovered that app probably 8 months ago, and I have been, just consuming it and on there, especially in the evening time. It seems to kind of be my way of, before I fall asleep, I'll sit there and read.
They know what I
medium.
like to read.
Yeah,
They built a reading twin. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you give them suggestions and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. I love it. Well, cool. Well, thanks, Travis. Appreciate you being on the podcast. This was very, very interesting.
Thank you,
and
Jason.
I hope it's. I wish you much luck. I'm gonna be really excited. Maybe when the book's out, we could have a whole podcast on that. That would be awesome. I'd love to read it and then go over it with you. That would be really cool.
Oh, yeah. That's more incentive to get it out.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks, Travis.
Cheers, Jason.
Thank you for joining us on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. And thanks to our sponsor, RigbyDigital.com.
Make sure to subscribe and share and go to abqpodcast.com.
Get show notes, resources, and links to everything we talked about today to help you navigate your journey as an entrepreneur
And business owner.